She's wearing an FBI wire to dinner with a killer. To save the Mafia boss who saved her, Arya has to seduce his deadliest rival. Hidden under her elegant dress is a wire, recording every threat Volkov makes. If he finds out, she's dead. But the rival boss just opened his private safe and handed her a USB drive. He claims it proves her protector actually orchestrated her brother's brutal torture. Who do you trust when both men are absolute monsters?
The night Arya's entire existence fractures, she finds herself in the harsh, fluorescent glare of a restaurant bathroom. Dabbing fresh blood from her swollen lip, she is meticulously rehearsing a hollow customer service smile, entirely unaware that the imposing stranger waiting at table 7 is about to deconstruct her very soul. By sunrise, her brother will vanish into the shadows, and this encounter will drag her into a ruthless underworld where morality is currency and survival has a heavy price. Today, you and I are going to unpack this story together, because the truth is we have all had to paint on a brave face to mask our private tragedies just to survive a difficult day. Her boyfriend, Marcus, was a coward of the highest order, dealing blows calculated to break her spirit while leaving no visible evidence behind. There is a profound tragedy in watching someone try to paint over their trauma. Arya scrapes the bottom of her concealer, her hands trembling as she desperately camouflages the violent bloom of a bruise beneath her eye. She bargains with herself, pleading for just 2 more hours of endurance to collect her tips and slip home before Marcus drowns his insecurities in liquor. The door swings open, flooding the space with the sounds of clinking, silver, and affluent laughter. Another server completely ignores her and vanishes. But Arya welcomes this cold isolation. It teaches us a vital lesson about survival. When you find yourself trapped in a room full of people, purchasing the illusion of perfection, rendering yourself completely invisible is often the most effective armor you can possibly wear. Stepping through the swinging doors, Arya enters a room curated for the absolute elite. Beneath blinding crystal chandeliers, she wades through an atmosphere thick with generational wealth, where the affluent treat workers like mere props in their theater of excess. Tucking her chin, she slips into her autopilot routine. Approaching table 7, she begins her rehearsed greeting, but the words catch in her throat. The man seated there is not looking at the menu. He is studying her with the heavy, calculating gaze of someone analyzing a complex puzzle. He wears a dark, meticulously tailored suit that radiates quiet, overwhelming authority. We must always remember that true power never needs to raise its voice or make a scene in order to completely paralyze a room and demand your attention. It is not the wealth that makes Arya's heart hammer against her ribs, but the absolute stillness of his posture. He observes her like an investigator dissecting a crime scene. She whispers an excuse to leave and pivots to escape, but a single quiet command freezes her. He asks what happened to her face. The question lands with the devastating force of a physical blow. Her hand flies up to shield her cheek as she stammers out a fragile lie. He calmly sets the menu down and demands to know who hurt her. Most people will eagerly accept an easy lie to avoid their own discomfort, but this man refuses to look away. The truth is that sometimes the most frightening thing in the world is having a complete stranger finally see the pain you worked so tirelessly to conceal. When he orders a rare vintage, Arya practically flees. Reaching the bar, her hands tremble so violently, she presses them against the cold oak to ground herself. She is unraveling, furious that this man effortlessly stripped away her emotional armor. The bartender notices her panic, sliding over a wildly expensive bottle, and noting that Table 7 requested her specifically. Walking back, her legs feel like lead. The mysterious patron is firing off rapid Italian on his phone, radiating the dark aura of an organized syndicate. He hangs up, asks for her name, and introduces himself as Leon. The lesson here is deeply ingrained in human nature. When a dangerously powerful individual takes a sudden, calculated interest in your personal trauma, your ultimate survival instinct will always scream at you to run away. Revealing his ownership in the restaurant, Leon commands her to sit. Arya perches on the edge of the chair, muscles coiled to bolt. Leon takes a slow sip of his wine before asking exactly how long someone has been abusing her. She flinches, desperately trying to deflect, but Leon pierces right through her fragile defense. When she asks why he cares, his expression turns entirely cold. He states quietly that he despises seeing valuable things broken. She stands up abruptly, overwhelmed by the comment, and rushes back to her shift. We must always remember this crucial boundary in life. Never allow anyone, no matter how influential, to reduce your complex humanity to that of a tragically damaged object they simply wish to collect and repair for their own dark satisfaction. You simply cannot outrun a shadow. Throughout her shift, Arya feels Leon's heavy gaze tracking her movements. He leaves his meal untouched, biding his time. Let us pause here for a moment, you and I. Have you ever felt that suffocating dread when you realize your safety is expiring? As the room empties, Arya's phone vibrates. Marcus is demanding her location, instantly tightening her throat. She promises to be home soon, but his chilling reply demands an earlier arrival. Being late guarantees violence. When she looks up, Leon is standing just 3 feet away. He states plainly that she is terrified of the man waiting at home. It is not posed as a question. It is a cold, unavoidable truth that strips away the last of her protective illusions. Arya's voice trembles, insisting he knows nothing about her life. Leon remains perfectly still, calmly stating that he knows she is running out of time. He produces a sleek business card, instructing her to call not if, but when she inevitably needs help. Arya stares at the card as if it were a live explosive, falsely claiming she does not need saving. Stepping closer, Leon brings the metallic scent of gunpowder mixed with expensive cologne. He promises that when she finally accepts reality, his will be the only number she dials, before vanishing into the shadows. The vital lesson here is that sometimes fate extends an unexpected lifeline right before the storm breaks. Later, rushing to her car, a heavily intoxicated Marcus calls, guaranteeing a night of absolute cruelty. Pleading into the phone, Arya promises to be home in 10 minutes. Marcus snaps a vicious threat before cutting the connection. She races through the slick streets, her mind consumed by Leon. A chilling question hangs in the air. What is more terrifying, that a syndicate boss recognizes her trauma, or that a part of her craved his dark salvation? Pulling up to her apartment, she draws a shaky breath. Finding the front door unlocked is a glaring signal of the danger inside. In the cold blue glow of the television, Marcus sits beside an empty whiskey bottle. He rises unsteadily, growling about her tardiness as he violently lunges forward. Always remember this truth. Remaining with a toxic partner will never heal their brokenness. It will only succeed in destroying your own spirit. The apartment reeks of cheap liquor and rabid jealousy as Marcus digs his fingers brutally into Arya's arm. We recognize this specific brand of fragile, insecure rage, born from a profound lack of control. Without warning, he strikes her face, the impact drawing fresh blood. The silence is suddenly shattered by her ringing phone. Marcus violently snatches the device. The caller, Ethan, her brother, but Marcus's paranoia paints everyone as a threat. Over the speaker, Ethan's frantic voice fills the room, begging his sister to listen. Marcus merely laughs, shoving Arya hard against the floorboards. Let me offer a profound lesson here. The individuals who scream the loudest about demanding respect are almost always the exact same people actively breaking your spirit into pieces. Marcus openly mocks the terror in Ethan's words. Suddenly, the tone shifts. Ethan's voice drops into a heavy cadence, layered with terrifying finality. He softly tells Arya how sorry he is, confessing he tried to fix a mistake before the line abruptly clicks shut. The dial tone rings out like a funeral bell. Marcus sneers, tossing the phone aside as if it were a joke. He is too dense to grasp the gravity, but Arya feels profound dread settle into her bones. She redials only to hit voicemail. Pure adrenaline floods her system. When Marcus attempts to restrain her, she rips her arm free with feral strength. The reality is that the terror of losing family can instantly transform a victim into a relentless survivor. Before Marcus can reach the stairs, she is sprinting into the night. Arya grips the steering wheel with bone-white knuckles, steering blindly into the city's decaying industrial sector. She pulls up to her brother Ethan's building, finding the front door shattered like a broken jaw. Racing up the stairs, she steps into his apartment and finds absolute devastation. Splintered furniture and crushed glass cover the floor. The wreckage of a life completely torn apart. She moves through the ruins, whispering his name into the heavy quiet. Then she sees the bedroom. The mattress is violently flipped, and stamped onto the wall is a massive, smeared handprint in drying blood. Her legs simply give out. We often believe we are prepared for the worst, but when the physical proof of our deepest fears finally stands before us, our bodies simply forget how to carry the weight. Let us step into this room with her for a moment. Arya is barely holding on to the splintered door frame when her phone begins to vibrate. She answers with trembling hands, and the voice on the other end is terrifyingly steady. There is no anger, only the chilling, polished calm of a corporate predator. The man reveals that Ethan tried to steal $50,000 from the most dangerous syndicate in the city. He knows she lacks the funds, his tone turning dark as he suggests she might pay her brother's debt through other, deeply personal means. They are holding Ethan as collateral. The line goes dead, leaving her alone with the scent of copper in the air. It serves as a stark reminder that life-altering trouble rarely knocks politely. It simply kicks down your door and demands everything you have. The sheer weight of the trauma splinters her reality, stealing her memory of the next few hours. When the fog finally lifts, she is standing beneath the buzzing neon lights of a desolate parking lot at 2 a.m. Clutched in her hand is a business card belonging to Leon Valley. The Syndicate boss warned her this tragedy was inevitable. She cannot begin to fathom the violent depths of his empire, nor the agonizing price he will extract for his protection. But trapped in a corner with no way out, she dials the number. Hearing his deep, resonant voice, her defenses completely shatter. She weeps, confessing the ransom and the blood on the wall. It reveals a terrifying human truth. When you are drowning at absolute rock bottom, even the darkest demon offering a hand can look like a savior. The silence stretching across the phone line is thick and suffocating, wrapping around her like a physical weight. When Leon finally speaks, he calmly asks for her location. He promises to clean up the wreckage, but then he delivers a devastating condition. If he unleashes his resources to wage war for her, she will belong to him completely until the massive debt is settled. It is a chilling declaration of ownership. Yet, she is so entirely broken that the inherent danger fails to register. She breathes a quiet surrender into the receiver. 20 minutes later, a heavy black vehicle glides into the lot, releasing two armed enforcers. They tap on her glass, and she unlocks her door. We must understand that pure desperation is a blinding force, one that will always convince you to open the very doors you should keep locked. Stepping into that vehicle feels like taking a ride in her own hearse. Her legs tremble, stripped of their strength. The interior air is heavy with the scent of rich leather and unspoken violence. They carry her away from the decaying streets, ascending into the elite waterfront district. Through a private elevator, she emerges into a vast penthouse built on syndicate blood money. Towering glass walls look down upon the city. Leon stands motionless by the window, a solitary king observing his kingdom. With a single gesture, his enforcers fade into the shadows. Arya remains frozen, clutching her worn bag. It presents a bitter reality we all must face. Sometimes the only sanctuary left in a burning world is simply a far more beautiful, terrifyingly expensive cage. Leon approaches her with the deliberate grace of an apex predator, demanding she lay out every broken piece of the truth. Trembling, Arya unpacks the entire tragic history of her brother, outlining his reckless gambling and the extortionate ransom. Leon listens, his expression an impenetrable mask of stone, but then he completely flips the narrative, dropping a catastrophic revelation. Ethan did not merely steal from street thugs, he stole directly from the Volkov family. In this dark underworld, the Volkovs dictate the absolute laws of life and death. Leon pours a drink, stating the brutal math. Ethan is most likely already dead, and their crosshairs are now locked onto her. Her entire world shatters in an instant. The truth is agonizing, but learning to face the brutal reality of a situation is often the only way to survive the collapse of your world. Let us look at this piece by piece, shall we? Leon takes a slow sip of his drink. He has the wealth required to erase this nightmare, but men forged in violence never offer favors out of pure grace. Claiming Arya is a profound display of dominance against his rivals. He lays out his non-negotiable terms. She must remain hidden within his fortress, severing all ties to her past, and trust his violent methods without question. In return, he will locate her brother and neutralize the looming threat. She looks into his lifeless eyes and softly agrees. A hollow, chilling smile ghosts across his face. It is a vital lesson to carry with you. When you choose to make a pact with a predator, you lose the right to act surprised when you are dragged down into the deepest, darkest waters. Leon escorts her to her quarters, and the sheer scale of the room is staggering. It is a vast expanse of marble and cold furniture, a jarring contrast to the cramped apartment she shared with her former partner Marcus. She stands paralyzed, staring through the glass at the skyline, feeling like a specimen in a jar. Leon mentions that a complete wardrobe has been curated for her, stating with terrifying finality that her old life is permanently over. She stammers, asking what he intends to do about Marcus. Leon simply taps his expensive watch, instructs her to rest, and drops a quiet warning about the hidden cameras before the heavy door clicks shut. We must realize that trading a familiar, painful struggle for an elegant one does not grant you true freedom. It merely upgrades the aesthetic of your prison. She traded a rusted iron cage for one of solid gold, and the grip of true panic finally takes hold. Stumbling into the marble bathroom, she turns the shower to a scalding heat, letting the roaring water drown out her violent sobs. She stands beneath the burning spray until exhaustion forces her mind into static numbness. Later, wrapped in unfamiliar silk, she stares into the darkness, convinced sleep will never find her. Yet, human endurance always hits a wall. She collapses into a heavy sleep, only to be violently pulled back to reality by the morning light. For a single second, there is peace before the horror of her situation crashes down again. Always remember this simple truth. You can exhaust yourself running from your demons in the dark, but the morning sun will always arrive to collect the debt. Her phone illuminates to reveal a dozen erratic messages from Marcus, swinging wildly between anger and desperation. She quietly deletes the entire thread. A sharp knock interrupts, and an older woman steps in bearing a tray of food. This is Elena, whose shadowed eyes suggest decades of syndicate collateral damage. She states the master of the house arranged her meal. When Arya asks for Lycion, Elena casts a cold stare. Leon vanished before dawn, leaving orders for Arya to prepare for a critical meeting. Her stomach twists so violently that the food tastes like ash. The anticipation of disaster is a unique torture, often more agonizing than the blow itself. You must fiercely protect your inner peace before the heavy clouds break. You and I are going to unpack this disturbing detail together. Arya opens the closet, finding rows of designer clothing perfectly tailored to her exact measurements. It is an unsettling display of how thoroughly she was watched. Stepping into the living area, she finds a ruthless corporate man occupying the sofa. He introduces himself as David Crane, the architect who cleans up the syndicate's mistakes. Gesturing to a chair, he declares it is time to work. Arya pleads for any sign her brother is alive, but David remains blank. The rival organization is escalating the war, and he demands she lay out every flaw in her brother's recent history. Here is a brutal reality of the world. When a cold man in a tailored suit asks about your family's mistakes, your only chance of survival is to hand over the unvarnished truth. Arya surrenders every scrap of intelligence she holds. She describes her brother arriving at her door weeks ago, physically deteriorated, begging for a bailout. She exposes the agonizing depths of his gambling addiction. David absorbs the information in silence, typing without a shred of empathy. As she finishes, he drops a shattering revelation. Ethan was not merely a desperate addict. He was actively employed as a cash runner for the rival syndicate. The final piece is devastating. Ethan was tasked with transporting $80,000, but he delivered an empty bag and vanished. Now, the cartel demands their capital, multiplied by the insult. The blood drains from her face. Pay close attention to this pattern. The toxic secrets you desperately hide from the people you love are almost always the weapons that return to destroy them. We are reaching the core of this nightmare. That $50,000 ransom was just an initial test. David explains that Leon possesses enough leverage to freeze the rival family, provided Arya remains a ghost. But a massive variable has compromised the board. Her volatile ex, Marcus, just filed a missing person report with the police. The room's temperature drops as David's eyes turn dead. He states the boss is addressing the situation, delivering a threat so chilling it freezes her blood. In their violent world, loose as are not managed. They are permanently erased. He implies her ex is about to be executed. He gathers his things and walks away, leaving her suffocating in horror. It is a brutal awakening. Sometimes, the monsters you beg for shelter turn out to be infinitely more lethal than the storm you are running from. Let us examine the architecture of a gilded cage. Arya finds herself locked within a billionaire's penthouse, a space draped in cold, sterile marble that functions as a literal prison. Leon holds the only key, as Elena, the housekeeper, guides her through this expansive monument to dark money. The rules of her confinement are laid bare. No visitors, 0 deliveries, windows bolted shut against the sky, and an elevator locked behind a keypad. Arya attempts to project strength, claiming she is not a captive, but Elena responds with a pitying smile that strips away her armor. We must understand a crucial truth here. We often construct our own psychological prisons long before an external force turns the actual lock. Left alone, Arya spirals into a blur of panic as the terrifying reality of her new existence finally takes root. Picture Arya standing by the window like a hollow ghost when her phone breaks the silence. It is Leon. He issues a cold command to be ready for dinner at 7. When she asks why, his reply is an exercise in pure dominance. Because I said so. Later, Elena delivers a sleek black dress, woven from the kind of silk Arya once spilled drinks on as a waitress. She slips into it, feeling like a commodity at a dark auction, only to discover a terrifying detail. It fits perfectly. This man calculated her exact measurements while she slept. She stares into the glass and barely recognizes the woman looking back. You and I must recognize a dark reality here. Sometimes the hardest part of surviving is realizing you must wear a stranger's mask just to make it through the night. The evidence of her past trauma is buried beneath layers of expensive makeup. At 7, Leon enters wearing a sharp, dark suit that seems to swallow the light. He studies her with calculating eyes before whispering that she is beautiful. A flush rises to Arya's cheeks as he guides her onto a vast terrace overlooking the Black Harbor. Flickering candles cast long shadows. The scene mimics a romantic date, a stark contrast that makes her captivity feel vastly more suffocating. He pulls out her chair like a gentleman and pours a glass of incredibly expensive. Let us look at this piece by piece. Leon insists she is safe, a promise that lands like lead. Arya fires back that his word means nothing, which only makes the boss smirk. The rival Volkov family is bleeding into his territory, and he needs a spark to ignite a war. That spark is her brother, Ethan. She accuses him of turning her blood into a slaughter, but Leon merely sips his dark wine. He calls it leverage. The Volkovs think they hold the ultimate prize. Blind to the fact that Leon commands the harbor, he plans to choke their supply lines to dust. It is a bitter lesson about human nature we all face eventually. Real power is not about throwing the first punch. It is letting your enemy believe they wear the crown, right before you shatter the ground beneath their feet. Leon spells out his cold philosophy. Kindness is a myth. You survive by becoming the most ruthless soul in the room. Over a beautifully arranged dinner, he drops a sudden bombshell, asking why she has not brought up Marcus, her abusive ex. Her head snaps up. Leon smiles thinly. The trash has already been handled. Marcus came hunting for her, only to collide with 3 enforcers who made it clear she is entirely off limits. Panic flashes across her face. What if Marcus goes to the police? Leon simply slices his steak with the precision of a surgeon. He already took the security tapes. If Marcus whispers her name, he rots in a cell. We are forced to swallow a very bitter truth here. Sometimes, the absolute only shield you can find against a monster is a shadow that happens to be far darker. Leon remains unbothered. He dismisses Marcus as a coward, noting how abusers always fold when a bigger predator steps into the light. Across the table, Arya is frozen. Her mind is at war. One half is sickened by this criminal madness. The other half feels a dark rush of relief, knowing her tormentor is finally trembling. Catching her distraction, Leon snaps her back to reality. asking what she actually wants. She demands her brother back, but Leon pushes deeper, probing for her true end game. He studies her like a complex equation. She has spent her life hiding, he says, but she is far from weak. Her raw survival instinct is a rare currency. It is a heavy truth we rarely admit. The most agonizing pain often forges the exact psychological armor you need to survive whatever comes tomorrow. She asks how she could possibly hold value for a boss. Leon explains his world runs on absolute loyalty. In a quiet move, he offers her a seat at the table. It is a choice. When the dust settles, she can take the cash and vanish, or she can stay and learn the dark mechanics of real power. Why her? Because she never made excuses for her abuser. She owned her terror, and in a world of liars, that honesty is priceless. Arya chokes up, insisting she will not cross into crime. Leon flashes a dangerous smirk. His empire operates in the shadows the law cannot reach. He is not asking her to be an assassin. It is a quiet lesson we all face. Sometimes, a single crossroads forces us to decide if we will spend our lives running or finally turn around and become the storm. He advises her to pay attention, leaving Arya speechless. Leon offers his hand. Before her instincts scream in protest, she accepts. His grip is an unsettling paradox of extreme danger and strange safety. Guiding her to the terrace, the untouchable boss drops his armor. He confesses he crawled out of the exact same gutter she did. His father was a monster who broke his mother down. At 12 years old, Leon swore never to be a victim again. Arya stands, stunned. The illusion of the flawless suit fades, revealing a boy who escaped hell by making himself indispensable to the city's worst men. He worked. He observed. He waited. It is a profound truth we must remember. The tallest empires are always built on the dark foundations of unimaginable pain. You and I have probably experienced that turning point. That exact second you decide to stop running and push back against the dark. Leon holds her gaze, noting she is standing at that very crossroads. She must choose between remaining the prey or becoming a storm. Arya wants to scream that he knows nothing about her trauma, yet the brutal psychological truth silences her. Perhaps being the victim is the only identity she remembers how to wear. Barely holding it together, she whispers she needs time. Leon steps back, leaving her isolated against the glowing skyline. She stays in the freezing air until her bones ache before retreating to wait for the dawn. It is a haunting reality we all face. Sometimes, the absolute hardest prison to escape is the one we construct inside our own minds. Picture a woman hollowed out by her existence, tracing invisible cracks in the ceiling. It is a tragedy when a person forgets the mechanics of hope. Suddenly, a phone screen shatters the dark. A text, 9 in the morning. Be ready. Morning arrives with a sharp knock, giving her 30 minutes. She walks out, expecting the terrifying enforcer she knows. Instead, Leon is stripped of his mob armor, wearing denim and a leather jacket. He looks unguarded, which makes him infinitely more dangerous. In the concrete belly of the garage, he navigates a grey sedan through the city like a phantom. You and I know that moving through shadows with such ease only comes from a lifetime of hiding. The simplest truth of survival is that broken people only ever feel truly safe in the dark. They stop at a diner trapped in the 1950s. Leon orders coffee with an unsettling, calm demeanor. When Arya questions this, he stirs his sugar with deliberate slowness. He wants her to realize he is not the chaotic monster of her past. She tries hiding her fear, but he reads her flinching posture. She is bracing for the sudden violence she endured with Marcus. Leaning close, Leon shatters that illusion, confessing that he is actually far more dangerous Marcus was a coward driven by tantrums. Leon Ruins lives with surgical intention. Yet he draws a strict moral line, destroying only those who have earned it. It teaches us a vital lesson. True peace is never found in gentle lies, but in the firm, unyielding grip of absolute honesty. Let us examine the psychology here. Arya pushes her food around in nervous silence. Leon asks a weighted question about her brother Ethan, probing to see who he was before his downward spiral. In the underworld, emotional leverage is currency. Arya reveals her family's fracture point. A car crash took their parents, forcing Ethan into punishing labor. But sacrifice often breeds resentment. Once Arya graduated, Ethan collapsed under his martyrdom, drowning in addiction. When she tried to save him, he violently pushed her away. Left completely isolated, she became the perfect prey for an abuser like Marcus. We frequently witness this tragic cycle in human behavior. People run straight into the arms of familiar destruction because the solitary work of healing feels far too agonizing to endure. Guilt has a brutal way of consuming a person from the inside out. For Arya, it is a quiet, relentless whisper, insisting she completely failed her brother. But Leon immediately shuts that narrative down. He makes it clear that Ethan's colossal mistakes are not hers to carry. It is a harsh reality we often forget. Having a good heart frequently curses you to shoulder the blame for the chaos of others. Their drive leads them to a rusted-out industrial wasteland. Yet, when Leon keys in a code, the groaning steel door reveals a pristine sanctuary humming with quiet power. Inside waits Simone, a woman whose presence radiates a freezing, calculated menace as she welcomes Leon home. The jarring contrast holds a profound life lesson. The most valuable things we choose to protect are almost always concealed behind the ugliest, most shattered exteriors. Leon brushes off the underground fortress as a simple logistics company, earning a knowing smirk from Simone. She is the architect in the shadows, keeping his bloodier enterprises entirely off the grid. One look at Arya, and Simone pieces the puzzle together. They have located Ethan. A rival syndicate has him pinned down by the river, and the enemy is currently suffocating in their own panic, realizing they just drew Leon into the fray. Let them sweat, Leon murmurs, allowing the psychological torture to marinate. Later, the tension inside the car is thick enough to cut. Arya finally snaps, demanding to know why a hardened kingpin is risking a turf war for a total stranger. The answer reveals a raw truth about human nature. We often throw ourselves into the fire to save complete strangers simply because we are desperately trying to rescue the ghosts we failed in our own past. Merging into the heavy traffic, Leon calmly pulls the pin on his darkest secret. When he was just 15, he attempted to murder his own abusive father. The confession leaves Arya entirely speechless. He recounts the nightmare with chilling detachment, the drunken monster, the plastic bag, the suffocating silence. Instead of gratitude, his mother banished him to the streets for trying to save her life. He was eventually taken in by an uncle who drilled a brutal philosophy into his head. Violence is never an emotional outburst. It is a surgical tool. You do not spill blood unless there is a clear return on investment. Leon looks at Arya, seeing the reflection of his own shattered youth in her eyes. Her panic finally settles into a profound sense of being seen. It teaches us a strange but comforting lesson. The deepest, most genuine empathy usually crawls out of the darkest shadows. Let us examine this dynamic together. Back in the dim garage, Arya softly thanks him for refusing to handle her like shattered glass. Leon's expression softens as he points out that she is not broken, just bent. This distinction carries a vital truth. There is a fundamental difference between a spirit that is completely destroyed and one that is simply bowing to survive a devastating storm. Upstairs, the anticipation becomes agonizing. Leon vanishes into his office, while Arya wears a track into the floorboards. At 10, he emerges with the victory. Ethan is trapped at Pier 17. Adrenaline floods Arya's veins, and she demands a spot on the front lines. Instantly, the protector evaporates. The ruthless boss takes over, laying down an unbreakable law. She stays, he fights, he vows to bring her brother back. Some promises are forged in absolute steel, built to ensure the innocent never bleed. Arya wanted to scream that she deserved a place on the front lines of her own family's nightmare, but a single glance at the hard set of Leon's jaw confirmed the debate was over before it began. She offered a hollow, calculated nod. He recognized the lie immediately, yet chose to let it breathe. That night, she lay paralyzed in a cold bed, listening to the heavy heartbeat of the city. Morning arrived like a bruise, painted in grey rain that hammered the glass. Her bones ached with exhaustion, but nervous energy dragged her up to resume pacing. When the door swung open at 7, the man standing there was unrecognizable. The quiet stranger from the diner was gone. Clad in dark tactical gear, Leon had transformed into a living weapon. It serves as a stark reminder. When survival is on the line, the gentle protector must step aside to let the Grim Reaper handle the dirty work. The overt menace from earlier evaporated, replaced by an unsettling, clinical calm. He slid a plate across the counter, warning her the hours ahead would be a brutal grind. Arya choked down dry toast while Leon paced, downing black coffee and glaring at his encrypted tablet. The penthouse air felt thick, suffocating under the weight of impending violence. He confirmed they were striking at dusk. Dropping his device, he locked his cold eyes onto hers and demanded an ironclad promise. She was to remain secured in the room, no matter how much the isolation chewed at her sanity. When she asked what would happen if he died out there, his expression turned to granite. Swift, he swore her brother was coming home. But we all understand the cruel mathematics of trauma. Trust is an astronomically expensive luxury that those who have been deeply hurt simply cannot afford to buy into. Arya managed a fragile whisper of agreement. Leon paused, studying her face as if committing a priceless painting to memory before walking into the fire, and then he was gone. The isolation was oppressive, with each hour dragging like heavy iron chains. By 2 in the afternoon, her anxiety had her practically vibrating. Shortly before 3, Leon re-emerged alongside 3 massive enforcers entirely draped in black. He offered her one final, piercing look, delivering a single command to stay put before he melted into the shadows. The silence in the penthouse became loud enough to break her mind. She lasted 20 minutes before her restraint snapped. Pulling on her darkest coat, she locked onto Pier 17. It brings up a very real truth. Sometimes, the most dangerous choice you can make is refusing to sit comfortably in the dark while others bleed to fight your battles. To join the fray, she had to break out of her gilded cage. Standing before the elevator keypad, her pulse battered against her ribs. She missed Leon's code, but necessity breeds resourcefulness. She knew the elderly housekeeper used the lift, and older generations rarely trust their memories with security systems. Arya tore through the kitchen with frantic precision. After 15 agonizing minutes, she unearthed a worn notebook tucked beneath some spare batteries. Written in immaculate cursive were the digits. Her hands shook as she punched them in, the descending elevator feeling like a terrifying freefall into the abyss. Down in the garage, she expected guards but found a silent gallery of vehicles. A sleek black coupe sat waiting, keys resting in the console. It reminds us of a simple rule. Occasionally, life cracks a door open solely to test if you have the courage to walk through it. The coupe's engine roared, propelling Arya out into a miserable rainstorm. Her chest tightened with raw terror. You and I have probably both felt this exact kind of desperation. It is the kind of love that forces you to steer directly into a hurricane when someone you care about is trapped inside. After 30 agonizing minutes in traffic, she abandoned the car near Pier 17 and pushed forward into the biting cold. The freezing downpour soaked her jacket as she ghosted between the shadows. Up ahead sat the rusted warehouse Leon had described. Suddenly, the massive steel doors shrieked in protest. Leon and Simone emerged, shoving a terrified hostage forward at gunpoint. But as the light caught his face, the bottom fell out of Arya's stomach. It was not her brother. She pressed herself flat against the slick brick wall, completely paralyzed, desperately straining to hear the lethal words Leon, one, was murmuring to the captive. The captive shook his head in defiance, a fatal miscalculation. Leon offered a microscopic nod, and Simone drove her pistol across the man's jaw with sickening force. The guard crumpled onto the wet concrete. Hiding in the shadows, Arya had to clamp a hand over her mouth to trap a gasp. Make no mistake, witnessing unvarnished violence fundamentally alters the architecture of your soul. Leon's freezing voice sliced through the downpour, demanding the location of the Bennett boy. The bleeding guard foolishly spat curses. Simone raised her weapon again, but Leon crouched, a metal blade catching the dim light. He casually detailed the mechanics of severing fingers, musing over how difficult the phone call to the man's wife would be. It proves a dark truth. Pure fear is the ultimate skeleton key for unlocking any secret. The guard turned the color of ash and broke, screaming that Volkov relocated the boy that morning as an insurance policy. Simone pressed her boot near the guard's face, demanding names. Coughing violently, the man surrendered the truth. A notorious enforcer named Petrov had snatched the boy. Leon slowly rose to his full height, exchanging a chilling, silent glance with Simone. The most consequential conversations in life often occur in the heavy spaces between words. Leon instructed the trembling guard to call Petrov on speakerphone, promising an agonizingly slow demise if a single warning slipped through. The terrified lackey fumbled his phone, his eyes completely locked onto the unblinking edge of Leon's knife. 4 agonizing rings echoed through the street. When Petrov answered, the bleeding guard lied with flawless conviction, claiming upper management demanded an immediate status update due to rival syndicate activity. It is a tragic reality to observe. Betrayal becomes effortless when personal survival is the very last card in your hand. Dmitri's voice shook as he begged Petrov for the address. The pregnant pause over the tiny speaker was pure torture. Finally, Petrov grunted the coordinates, confirming they were fortified inside an abandoned meat-packing plant on Archer Street. Leon gave a sharp hand signal, and the line died before his heavy boot crushed the phone into shattered glass. Hauling the guard up, Leon demanded a defensive head count. Dmitri openly sobbed, estimating 6 armed shooters. Then came the devastating question: what condition was the boy in? Dmitri confessed they had nearly beaten the kid to death hunting for hidden cash. Behind the brick wall, a suffocating anchor dropped deep into Arya's chest. We rarely understand the brutal depths of our own resilience until someone we fiercely love has been broken. Leon gave a singular, grim nod. He ordered Simone to stash the guard in the van, immediately dialing a shadow contact to pivot the deadly trajectory of their mission. Leon shouted commands into his device, demanding surveillance on the plant and a clear escape path. As the call ended, he froze. Arya understood her devastating error a fraction too late. Driven by the agonizing news of her brother, she wandered from the protective darkness and stood exposed in the rain. Leon shifted from cold calculation to absolute rage. He demanded why she left the safe house. She cried out that Ethan was her family. Let us acknowledge a profound truth here. Blind devotion often drags a pure heart into fatal traps. He gripped her arm with unforgiving force, pulling her to the vehicle. Her desperate attempt to play the savior, he warned, was only watering the seeds of their mutual destruction, guaranteeing her an early and preventable grave. Leon pushed the heavy door open and forced her inside. If she caught a bullet now, he snapped, his entire sacrifice would mean nothing. Notice the bitter reality of the guardian archetype here. The hardest pill for a protector to swallow is their lack of control over those they try to save. He slammed the door, rattling the glass. Arya watched him engage in a vicious argument with Simone, whose resentful glares pierced the windshield. Simone stormed off, leaving Leon to take the wheel. He accelerated without sparing Arya a single glance. The cabin grew thick with unsaid venom. We must remember that weaponized silence is often the heaviest beating a person can endure. They coasted into a wasteland of decaying factories, killing the engine deep in the cold shadows. Leon turned to her, his speech devoid of warmth. He laid down the absolute law: lock the doors and stay invisible. Arya offered a silent nod. He pressed a crumpled paper into her hand, instructing her to find Marcus if he did not return in 60 minutes. Panic flooded her eyes, but he silenced her. Then his stoic facade cracked as his hand brushed her cheek. Notice this profound truth. The heaviest emotional armor built for survival always melts when touching the one thing a person truly cherishes. He swore to return, demanding she flee if the mission collapsed. She whispered her vow, and he dissolved into the storm. 10 minutes bled into 20. Arya sat confined in the vehicle, her isolated mind transforming into a spinning chamber of psychological torture. Let us examine this moment together. The rain hammered the vehicle. Soon, a solitary gunshot cracked the night wide open. Arya froze. A chaotic symphony of gunfire and screams erupted from the compound. Her primal instinct urged her to sprint into the violence, yet Leon's warning anchored her. We learn a hard lesson here. Honoring a quiet promise in stillness is far more agonizing than charging recklessly into the flames. A sickening silence descended, soon obliterated by an explosion that painted the sky a violent orange. Suddenly, the stolen burner phone in her pocket vibrated. An unknown number illuminated the glass. She answered with trembling hands. A chilling, perfectly refined male voice greeted her by name, calmly declaring their inevitable conversation had finally begun. Arya demanded a name. The caller introduced himself as Alexei Volkov, revealing her brother was held captive beside him. Volkov sounded like he was ordering a simple coffee while proposing a catastrophic trade. He wanted her life for Ethan's. Remember this fundamental truth. Predators routinely dress their worst atrocities as reasonable business negotiations. Arya frantically demanded proof. A muffled struggle echoed, followed by Ethan's shattered voice screaming for her to run. The phone was snatched back. Volkov recited an address on Industrial Boulevard, granting 30 minutes to surrender alone or Ethan dies. The line severed. Sitting in the dark, she considered calling Leon, but a fresh eruption of gunfire from the plant silenced that fragile hope. Her time had simply run out. The devastating reality hit her. Leon was fighting a war her mistakes catalyzed. If she waited, Ethan would end in a morgue. She ignited the engine, hands settling into a glacial focus. The navigation read 22 minutes. She drove with reckless abandon, tearing through the storm to save the brother who ruined his future for her. Industrial Boulevard appeared as a graveyard of rotting warehouses. She parked by Unit C. Her phone lit up with a mocking text praising her prompt arrival. The heavy steel doors disengaged with a sickening clank. Every survival instinct urged her to flee. Yet, recognize this. True loyalty always demands a terrible sacrifice. It means willingly marching into the absolute worst inferno for your blood. She stepped into the nightmare. We all carry debts, but family ledgers are paid out with pieces of your soul. Arya stepped onto the freezing concrete. Harsh halogens illuminated Alexei Volkov. He wore a sharp suit and a polite smile masking a dead heart. He thanked her for coming. Arya ignored him, locking eyes on Ethan. Her brother slumped in the shadows, his face pulverized into ruins. He choked a warning before a guard kicked his ribs. Arya surged forward, screaming for them to stop. Volkov raised a finger, pausing the violence. He circled her like a shark, whispering dark praise for her devotion. Understand this well. Love is merely a fatal liability in the criminal underworld. The trap was finally sprung. Volkov revealed his true objective, demanding the operational secrets to destroy Leon forever. Let us look at this together. You and I know this desperate underworld game. Volkov paced the damp concrete, fixing his eyes on the girl and shattering her reality. Ethan's debt was irrelevant. In this shadow economy, currency is cheap, but emotional control is gold. He viewed Arya simply as a weapon against a rival. She whispered that Leon barely acknowledged her existence. Volkov laughed at her innocence, unveiling the terrifying truth. Leon was currently burning his territory, risking his empire to keep her breathing. The most agonizing life lesson is discovering your worth to another person only when the receipt is printed in blood. Volkov made a brief call. The heavy doors groaned open, and his enforcers dragged in the bleeding, shattered form of Leon. Leon could barely stand. His arm hung at a sickening angle. He locked eyes with Arya, and his hardened mask finally shattered. It was not anger in his eyes, but raw grief. He called her a foolish girl, voice thick with unshed tears. Volkov stood laughing, mocking the emotional weakness burying them. The devil laid out his terms. Leon must abandon the territory, return the shipments, and pay $200,000. Leon asked for the price of refusing. Volkov did not blink. He pressed the freezing steel barrel flush against Arya's temple. Leon stared into her terrified eyes. You could see the devastating moral math processing in his soul. And true love is found in the terrifying willingness to lose everything, so someone else can keep breathing. He offered his own life for theirs. Volkov shook his head, rejecting the sacrifice. The fallen king was not finished. His voice hardened to iron, laying out a terrifying reality. If they did not leave alive, a file of dirty secrets would hit the FBI in 30 minutes. Volkov forced an arrogant smile, dismissing it as a bluff. The room went deathly quiet, the only sound the storm smashing the roof. Leon stared through his rival, challenging him to pull the trigger and find out. Volkov hesitated. The cold steel slipped from Arya's head. He argued a leak would destroy Leon too, but Leon had made his peace. Notice this philosophy of power. The truest strength we can build comes from fully accepting our own ruin before the battle even kicks off. Leon was ready to burn, and his rival was not. Picture the cinematic staging here. The air is thick with the scent of copper and regret. Leon anchors the scene with absolute conviction. Volkov aims a weapon at his face, promising a slow rot in a cell. Leon stares back with zero panic, delivering a line that defines his character. He is not insane, merely motivated. He orders Ethan to run to his sister and never look back. Listen, you and I know this undeniable truth. Sometimes, the truest form of love is having the devastating courage to walk away so someone else survives. Arya watches the blood dripping down Leon's face, her heart shattering. She whispers a desperate promise to come back. Leon simply offers a faint, haunting ghost of a smile in return. He already knows the tragic reality. She cannot ever return to this dark world. They manage barely half a block before Ethan's legs betray him, dragging both of them violently against the flooded pavement. The storm above is merciless, yet Arya outright refuses to accept defeat. She is desperate, screaming over the thunder, begging him to pull through. True resilience, we find, is only forged in the crucible of absolute exhaustion, born precisely when the body insists the tank is empty. Channeling every last drop of her fractured strength, she shoves him into the passenger seat and collapses behind the steering wheel, her hands trembling violently. She inputs the address from Leon's waterlogged card. 12 minutes. She drives like a phantom, tearing blindly through red lights, chasing hollow shadows in the rearview mirror. Ethan is slipping away in the passenger seat, gasping for air with agonizing breaths. Arya is quietly praying, pleading for him to hold on to the waking world. They arrive at a menacing brick building in the silent district, and she begins hammering furiously against the thick glass door. A colossal figure emerges. His name is Marcus, and his heavily scarred exterior makes him look like a monster. She screams that Leon sent her, that Volkov has taken him. It forces you and I to acknowledge a profound truth, does it not? Sometimes our greatest salvation arrives wrapped in the most terrifying packages imaginable. Marcus processes Ethan's fading pulse in a fraction of a second and makes a call. The girl is here, but the boss is missing. He knows immediately the strategy has crumbled. The phone call disconnects with a heavy final click, and Marcus studies Arya before gesturing for her to follow. He carries Ethan as if the man weighs nothing, depositing him in a stark back room that smells intensely of cold bleach and lingering regrets. An older, battle-hardened doctor immediately begins cutting away Ethan's ruined garments, asking zero questions. Arya stands completely frozen, anchored by the heavy chains of guilt, until Marcus pulls her aside to extract the truth. She confesses everything regarding the warehouse trap and the blind exchange. Marcus's expression darkens as the reality sets in. Leon traded his own survival for hers. It is a tragedy we often mirror. We make completely desperate choices in the pitch black, praying for the light, only to watch the shadows grow longer. Aubrey pleads with Marcus to launch a rescue, but he remains completely detached, his eyes locked on his screen. He states coldly that they do not execute rescue missions, trusting that Leon has carefully orchestrated a secondary plan. She is practically hyperventilating, demanding to know what happens if Volkov simply executes him. Marcus meets her gaze and replies that such an act would ignite an uncontrollable street war. She recalls Leon studying her in that warehouse, as if cementing her face in his memory for the final time. Marcus insists she must obey his protocols if she wants Leon to survive. The quiet hours of the night serve as their own unique torture, forcing us to sit in silence and confront our deepest mistakes without any distractions. Arya remains anchored to her chair in that unnerving, sterile room while the doctor works with practiced precision. A woman named Elena materializes like a ghost, tossing clean clothes onto Arya's lap without uttering a single word. Arya changes in a hollow daze, consumed entirely by the catastrophic weight of her failure. Elena attempts to project absolute certainty, declaring that Leon has survived impossible violence for 15 years without a misstep. But Arya holds the painful reality. He stumbled because of her. True vulnerability only emerges when we willingly lower our emotional armor, fully accepting the devastating toll it might demand. She replays that brief, chilling flash of terror in his eyes. Just around midnight, the doctor finally emerges with the verdict. Ethan will survive the night. The confirmation of his survival hits Arya with such profound force that her knees nearly give out from the overwhelming relief. Exhaustion instantly pulls her under into a heavy sleep, only to be shattered by David Crane looming over her like a dark omen. Normally untouchable, the man looks entirely hollowed out. It is 4 a.m, and he pulls her into a claustrophobic office. He unleashes his fury, demanding to know if she grasps that she just destroyed months of meticulous undercover operations. She fires back that she was only trying to protect her family. It is a cruel irony that our most noble protective instincts can inflict massive collateral damage on the very people trying to shield us. David states plainly that she cornered Leon into a fatal maneuver. The suffocating tension inside that cramped office threatens to shatter the walls. David violently drives his fist into the wooden desk, the impact echoing like gunfire in the dead silence. His jaw is clenched tight, radiating anger over the fact that Leon refused to let her bleed out on that restaurant floor. Yet, we understand that Leon recognized a flicker of humanity in her worth redeeming. When Arya softly asks for any updates, the crushing guilt is visibly consuming her spirit. David exhales a defeated breath, admitting there is nothing but radio silence. Volkov is keeping Leon caged to test his dangerous bluff regarding the trials. It brings us to a harsh realization. Simply offering an apology never begins to reconstruct the wreckage left behind when we recklessly shatter the rules. David studies her intensely, silently measuring if she possesses the psychological fortitude for what must happen next. He states unequivocally that in this vicious syndicate, allowing yourself to feel affection is identical to handing your adversary a loaded weapon. He slides a thick dossier of surveillance imagery across the desk. They have spent 18 months hunting Volkov, but they lack the physical proof of a deceased witness locked inside his personal vault. Arya questions her role in this grand design. David delivers the ultimatum. Volkov will inevitably summon her. Let us be clear about this moment. Sometimes, the only genuine way to capture a monster is to stare directly into its eyes and knowingly step into its trap, trusting your own resilience to survive the jaws. The directive is clear. David needs her to wear a concealed wire. Arya completely freezes, a wave of glacial dread flooding her system. She is being asked to manipulate the very psychopath who nearly butchered her brother. David insists it is the only viable path to securing his downfall, noting that Volkov's profound arrogance blinds him to the intelligence of women. He will never anticipate the deception. A vivid memory of cold steel and Leon bleeding out forces her hand. She draws a ragged breath and accepts the burden. Left alone in the aftermath, she buries her trembling face in her palms. She has spent her entire existence running from conflict. You simply cannot outrun the darkness forever. Eventually, you must pivot, plant your feet, and fight back against the creeping shadows. It is an entirely unhinged strategy, yet it represents the solitary path to repairing the damage she orchestrated. At 6 in the morning, Marcus stomps into the room clutching bitter coffee, his features carved from stone. Volkov transmitted a message confirming he is abandoning Leon at Pier 17 in 2 hours. Arya vaults from her chair, realizing this is the exact location where their nightmare originated. Marcus commands her to remain hidden, warning of an obvious ambush, but she rejects his authority entirely. He bartered his existence for hers, and she will not sit idly by. They depart together, parking a safe distance from the desolate pier. The absolute hardest part of any nightmare is that agonizing, suffocating silence right before the final hammer strikes the anvil. 30 minutes drag by with the agonizing crawl of a lifetime before a sleek black sedan finally emerges. 2 syndicate enforcers drag a broken figure from the vehicle and unceremoniously discard him onto the freezing concrete. It is Leon. His body is a map of violence, his arm bound in a makeshift sling, his face painted in deep bruises. Marcus surges forward, weapon drawn, and Arya shatters her promise, sprinting wildly into the open. Leon peers at her through exhausted, swollen eyes, groaning that he instructed her to stay away. She counters sharply that his orders mean nothing. Look, we all attempt to carry our most crippling agony completely alone, instinctively pushing away the very hands reaching out to save us. He simply asks if Ethan is breathing before surrendering to the dark. Back at the safe house, the doctor aggressively forces Leon's dislocated shoulder back into its socket with a sickening crack. Leon absorbs the blinding pain without a single flinch, projecting an aura of pure menace. He banishes Arya to a dimly lit room where she is already drowning in an ocean of guilt. Staring her down, he orders her to collect her brother and disappear into the wind before Volkov hunts them down. But Arya refuses to break. She knows intimately that he wagered his own pulse for hers. Leon attempts to construct a facade of cold logic, arguing it was merely a tactical necessity, devoid of any emotional weight. It is a fascinating defense mechanism. Some lies are so incredibly fragile, they completely shatter the precise second they leave your lips, betraying the heart underneath. She outright dismantles his hollow bluff, tearing apart his tactical strategy defense as absolute fiction. She witnessed the raw, unfiltered panic in his eyes the moment she was cornered. Under her relentless scrutiny, Leon finally fractures. He confesses that whenever her safety is compromised, he makes erratic, dangerous choices that put men in the ground. Hearing this, Arya sinks to her knees, staring directly into the abyss of his soul, and demands he teach her how to dismantle Volkov's empire. She is entirely finished playing the helpless victim. Leon gently grazes her bruised cheek, warning her that she is not prepared to survive this corrupted, venomous underworld. But she insists he make her ready. It teaches us something profound. True strength only materializes when we willingly step right into the roaring flames. Let us unpack this chessboard together. Because the stakes have suddenly skyrocketed, Leon finally yields, but he establishes an absolute law. She must follow his precise directives, and if he says run, she runs without looking back. He swears a blood oath to vaporize Volkov's entire syndicate if anyone touches her. For 7 grueling days, Arya is submerged in a brutal criminal crash course. David trains her to conceal a wire, while Marcus drills survival tactics. Down the hall, Ethan slowly heals, but the deafening silence between them is suffocating. It highlights a tragic irony. We often construct towering walls to protect the people we cherish, completely ignoring how those exact same walls simply lock us alone in the dark. Ethan sits in his room, drowning in a profound guilt that no medical professional could ever stitch together. Then, the absolute worst-case scenario unfolds. An unknown number flashes, and it is the architect of their misery himself, Volkov. The crime boss speaks with a voice dripping in manufactured charm, and actually issues an apology. He requests her presence for dinner at the Monarch, the most exclusive establishment in the city. When she questions his motive, he dangles the ultimate bait, promising to completely erase her brother's staggering debt in exchange for a single evening. It reveals a terrifying truth about human nature. The deadliest traps ever laid out for us are almost always beautifully disguised as the comforting illusion of a completely clean slate. Volkov claims they must discuss the Varelli situation, prompting Leon to instantly signal Arya to keep the mobster talking. Volkov performs a theatrical act, feigning deep concern regarding Leon's cycle of violence and offering her a supposedly safe exit strategy. The man is practically radiating weaponized empathy. Every primal instinct screams at her to sever the connection, but she glances at the evidence and traces the dark bruises on Leon's face. She agrees to meet at 8 o'clock the following night. The second the call disconnects, violent tremors overtake her body as she fights for a breath of oxygen. Leon quietly insists she can walk away, but she anchors her feet. Sometimes, walking straight into a roaring fire is the only genuine way to burn away the demons holding you hostage. Stick with me here, because the psychological tension is about to fracture the room. Arya looks Leon dead in the eye and declares she is permanently finished with living in fear. Leon offers a slow nod, swearing that he will be planted inside that restaurant. If the situation deteriorates, he will literally burn the establishment to the ground. The next 24 hours dissolve into relentless preparation. They secure a microscopic wire to her skin, while Marcus drills her on escape vectors. Leon provides the ultimate cheat code, instructing her to project weakness and feed Volgonov's towering narcissism. The lesson here is profound. Real courage is not the absence of terror, but rather staring your worst nightmare directly in the eyes and refusing to blink. Leon coaches her to project absolute terror, calibrating her demeanor to stroke Volkov's inflated ego. By 8 o'clock, Arya feels as though she has aged an entire decade. She slips into a dark, elegant dress, acutely aware of the freezing metal wire taped tightly against her ribs. Stepping into the Monarch feels like entering a glittering cage forged from crystal chandeliers. Volkov occupies a secluded table, wearing the patient grin of an apex predator. She forces a brittle smile, her eyes discreetly sweeping the crowd. She cannot locate Leon anywhere, yet she can feel the heavy, protective weight of his gaze. It reveals a quiet truth. Sometimes, true love is simply knowing someone is standing right there in the shadows while you walk into the flames. This underworld kingpin casually orders wine, performing the charade of ordinary citizens sharing a meal. Arya executes her role with precision, offering hollow laughter while the concealed wire captures every syllable. Eventually, the polished mask slips. Volkov leans across the table, his voice dropping as he paints Leon as a ruthless manipulator who only discards people. Then, he slides the ultimate temptation across the table, a pristine slate, permanently erasing her brother's ruin. In exchange, she merely needs to betray Leon and report his movements. Heed this fundamental life lesson. You must always remain deeply suspicious of those who offer sudden salvation in exchange for your loyalty. More often than not, they are simply fitting you for a brand new set of heavier chains. You and I are going to analyze this together, because the atmosphere just turned lethal. Arya's pulse is hammering a frantic rhythm against her ribs. She asks the crime boss what awaits if she declines his proposition. Volkov maintains his smile, but his eyes empty out into cold glass. He smoothly suggests that he could no longer guarantee her safety, implying that Leon's enemies might orchestrate a tragic accident. It is a cold-blooded execution threat wrapped in silk. She stammers that she needs time to deliberate, barely finding her way out without her knees buckling. Once safe in her car, her screen illuminates, a message from Leon telling her to come home. It reminds us that home is not merely a geographic coordinate. Sometimes it is just the person waiting for you in the dark. That single word strikes her straight down to the marrow. Home. Back at the penthouse, the crew is buzzing with anticipation. David isolates the crisp audio from the wire, securing a monumental victory. They officially have a formidable boss recorded engaging in witness tampering, and that threat is a perfect weapon. Leon bridges the distance, enveloping her in a gentle embrace despite his bruised ribs. He murmurs that her dangerous role is officially concluded, but Arya steps backward. She has spent her entire existence confined to psychological cages, treated like a fragile ornament, and she has finally tasted her own agency. She declares she is staying in the war, because once you unearth your genuine power, you must never allow anyone to push you back into the dark. Over the next 3 weeks, Arya engages in a delicate waltz with the devil 4 separate times. Every encounter is a masterpiece of deception. David analyzes the audio, Marcus engineers exits, and Leon remains the ghost haunting the perimeter. She plays the terrified victim flawlessly, and Volkov swallows the performance whole. He begins leaking syndicate secrets, detailing smuggling corridors and compromised officials. The dynamic violently fractures during the 5th phone call. Volkov casually informs her he possesses concrete documentation of Leon's true origins. He issues a strict ultimatum, demanding she visit his private estate alone at 9 o'clock. The agonizing truth is that the secrets we desperately conceal to shield our loved ones are frequently the exact weapons that destroy them. Volkov delivers a chilling warning, forbidding her from informing Leon before severing the line. Arya remains frozen, staring at the screen. This invitation is the golden opportunity David needs to infiltrate Volkov's fortress and extract the ledgers. Instead of concealing her movements, she marches into Leon's study to reveal the rendezvous. Leon loses his composure, pacing the room like a caged animal. He emphatically declares it is an obvious snare. His enemy's office is an impregnable stronghold, and if things implode, Leon will be powerless to extract her. Yet Arya stands firm, driven by a consuming need to unearth his past. Sometimes, our frantic obsession with uncovering the truth renders us entirely blind to the blazing inferno we are marching into. Let us examine this standoff, because the emotional gravity is immense. Leon aggressively outlines the danger, stating Volkov has buried people for less, and she intends to enter his sanctuary unescorted. Yet Arya remains immovable. Her tone is chillingly flat as she assures him the wire will broadcast every moment. Leon stares at her, the tension expanding. He quietly observes that she has fundamentally transformed. In reality, profound personal evolution only occurs when we are shoved against our absolute limits. She steps into his space, reminding him that he taught her to wield authentic power. Leon grips the desk, his knuckles white, and confesses a devastating vulnerability. If he loses her, his soul will never, rather, recover. She rests a hand on his shoulder, demanding his trust. Leon forces his eyes closed, delivering a single nod of submission. he issues a fierce mandate that she must adhere strictly to the established parameters. The ensuing 12 hours saturate the atmosphere with intoxicating adrenaline. David interrogates her on the fabricated narrative till her responses become reflexes, while Marcus guides her through disengaging window latches. Leon prowls the room like a tormented guardian. By 8:30, Arya stands before her reflection. The transmitter rests like ice against her ribs. She projects authority, yet internally she is consumed by dread. But understand this crucial truth. Experiencing fear is not the antithesis of bravery. It is the fundamental prerequisite that allows courage to exist. Leon appears in the threshold, announcing their 30-minute window. He closes the door, sealing them in silence. Leon's composure begins to fracture. He leans in, vowing that if the crime lord even looks at her improperly, he will violently dismantle the operation. Arya attempts to diffuse the gravity, offering a weak joke regarding his strategic planning. But Leon silences her with a tender touch to her cheek, confessing that her survival outweighs any scheme of vengeance. It illustrates how, within a corrupted world, genuine love becomes the ultimate act of radical rebellion. Arya leans into his palm, absorbing one final fragment of sanctuary. She softly murmurs that their relationship requires a discussion, but Leon bridges the distance, crashing his lips against hers. It is a desperate collision of paralyzing terror and fierce devotion. They separate, gasping for breath, as he begs her to return to him in one piece. By 9:10, she slides into the black sedan, utterly alone. The heavy earpiece rests against her skin like a lead weight. Through the static, Leon's voice anchors her, a steady promise that she is not stepping into this alone. She cannot speak, but his presence becomes her armor. They arrive at Volkov's towering glass headquarters. Let us pause and think about spaces like this. Towering monuments of wealth are so often just pristine masks designed to hide the rot beneath. Arya rides the elevator to the 20th floor, her pulse drumming a frantic rhythm. The doors part to reveal a shadowy reception room. Volkov stands by the window, turning with a smile so smooth it feels dangerous. When she demands what was promised, he points to a chair. She sits, ensuring the wire captures every breath, as he slowly pushes a dark folder across the mahogany desk. Volkov leans forward to deliver the killing blow, stating this folder holds the exact truth he has been burying. Arya opens it, and the breath leaves her lungs. Inside sits an archive of betrayal, grainy photographs, dense ledgers, and pages bearing Leon's undeniable signature. Volkov coats his words in a sickening sympathy, revealing that Leon has been a federal informant for half a year. He claims her brother and the rescue mission were just calculated theater to use her as bait. The most effective lies are terrifying because they use enough truth to make you question your own mind. Her vision blurs as she traces those signatures. When she asks why he is showing her this, Volkov insists Leon's turning her into a weapon, but he can finally offer her true safety from this war. In her ear, Leon is fracturing, his panicked voice insisting the documents are fabricated. But you and I know how the mind works. Once a single seed of doubt is planted, even cherished memories start to look like warnings. Arya looks back at how perfectly Leon arrived in her life. Was every meeting just a careful maneuver on his chessboard? She demands irrefutable proof. Volkov offers a cold smirk. He approaches the paneled wall, triggering a mechanism that reveals a heavy steel safe. Retrieving a small flash drive, his voice drops to a hypnotic cadence as he promises it contains Leon's true records. Her fingers tremble violently as she takes the drive, asking what she is about to see. Volkov lets the shadow consume his expression, stating it is unseen footage of her brother. Volkov's eyes turn void of emotion as he delivers the final strike. He explains that Leon knew the location of the warehouse all along. He allowed the men to break Ethan over 2 agonizing days, ensuring Arya would be desperate enough to blindly follow her savior. A cold nausea washes over her, and she begs him to be lying. Volkov simply leans back, inviting her to watch the tape. Pay attention here, because the most profound betrayals never arrive holding a knife. They come with open arms from the people you trust the most. In her ear, Leon is ordering her to evacuate, but her foundation has completely shattered. She rises on unsteady legs, murmuring that she must go. Volkov opens the heavy door with a parting threat, and she retreats into the sterile safety of the elevator. The flash drive burns in her pocket like an unpinned grenade. Stepping onto the desolate pavement, she finds Leon pacing near their vehicle. When he demands a report, she presents the drive. Her voice is a fragile blade as she accuses him of allowing Ethan's torture to forge her loyalty. Leon's expression drains of warmth, settling into an impenetrable mask. She breaks down, confessing her reality has dissolved. It is a harsh truth of life. Sometimes the hands pulling you from the fire are the ones that struck the match. She demands his prior knowledge of the raid. The city noise vanishes in the suffocating pause. Then, Leon delivers an emotionless admission. He knew 6 hours in advance, but held back because the tactical timing was flawed. She weeps openly, and his patience finally snaps. Leon refuses to yield an inch. He meets her devastated stare, stating his choices were a necessary burden. She asks if sacrificing her brother was just a convenient way to keep her tethered. Leon's defense is clinical. He argues Ethan brought the suffering upon himself, and intervening sooner would have sent his syndicate into a slaughter. A hollow laugh escapes her lips. She sees the grim poetry of it all. The rival boss was right. Leon is a master at cloaking his monstrosity in righteous logic, but running from a shattered mirror never repairs the glass. Resigned, she hands over the drive. The atmosphere back at the penthouse is heavy with dread. David loads the file, and a digital graveyard of dark secrets spills across the glowing screen. The truth is finally stepping into the light. We all know the terrifying freefall when solid ground ceases to exist. David scans the data, his voice dropping as he confirms the unthinkable. The informant records are authentic. The bottom falls out of Arya's world. David maps the timeline, revealing this operation started 8 months prior. The design was always about tearing Volkov down, making her a convenient pawn. Accused of using her, Leon steps forward and casually claims ownership of the manipulation. She stares at her protector, finally seeing the cold strings of the puppeteer. She demands the video. David obliges, and the dark warehouse flickers to life. Seeing Ethan battered in that chair is a stark reminder. The deepest wounds are always inflicted by those who treat human beings as disposable tools for their own gain. On the monitor, an enforcer delivers sickening blows to Ethan, causing Arya to recoil. The footage jumps, showing Ethan slumped in his restraints. Then, a familiar silhouette enters the frame. It is Leon. The air leaves Arya's lungs. Leon bends down, checking the boy's pulse with pure detachment. Ethan's bruised face lifts with an agonizing spark of hope. Instead of a rescue, Leon slowly shakes his head and vanishes into the dark. Arya erupts, demanding justification. Leon insists his solitary scouting run was just to confirm Ethan would survive until the team arrived. She cries that he could have saved him right then. Leon snaps back about the 6 armed guards outside. It is a haunting thought. But the heaviest guilt we carry is born from the ruthless mathematics we perform in the name of the greater good. Let us piece this puzzle together. Arya stands paralyzed, studying Leon's impenetrable expression. He engineered a labyrinth of deception, feeding her lies and steering her through danger. Yet his iron-fisted strategy is the sole reason her heart is still beating. She instructs David to let the drive finish. The final file is a grim insurance policy. The camera captures Volkov in a quiet conversation with a stranger before calmly drawing a weapon and ending the man's life with 3 shots. The timestamp aligns flawlessly with the unsolved murder of a federal witness. Checkmate. It all boils down to a beautifully ironic truth about life. Every corrupt empire forged in violence and innocent blood inevitably leaves behind the exact instrument required to burn its own kingdom to ash. Marcus exhales a heavy breath. This hidden drive was Volkov's ultimate fail-safe, a poisoned apple passed directly into Arya's hands. David questions the strategy, and Arya quickly untangles the dark psychology. The boss gambled on her viewing Leon as the ultimate betrayer. He wanted her to seek shelter with the devil she did not know. Leon steps forward, a rare vulnerability cracking his facade, and asks who she will side with. Arya studies this walking contradiction, a captor, a savior, a manipulator who recognized her strength. She measures the terrified girl she was against the fierce woman standing here now, gripping the execution order of a dynasty. She looks at Leon and declares she is choosing herself. It is a profound lesson. True power is found the moment you refuse to be a piece on someone else's leaderboard. She drops the wire onto the glass table, shedding her role as a pawn. She swears to give David the evidence to bury Volkov, but makes it clear that afterward she is walking away. She locks onto Leon's intense gaze, asserting she is her own entity, not a disposable asset. The silence that fills the penthouse is absolute. It is the quiet of a universe, realigning its gravitational center. David breaks the spell, confirming they have the ammunition to end Volkov tonight. Leon remains perfectly still, mesmerized by the woman who just rewrote his reality. When David suggests protective custody, Leon instantly vetoes the idea. His tone commands the room with absolute authority. She will stay under his roof, under his guard. It teaches us something essential. You have to boldly draw your own boundaries before anyone will ever respect your territory. David reads the finality in Leon's stare and departs, taking the flash drive. The penthouse now belongs solely to Arya and Leon, suspended above the glittering city. Leon's voice grows thick with rare emotion, telling her she could have died tonight. Arya stands firm. She explains she needed to walk into the fire to understand bravery, to permanently strip away her fear of Volkov and of him. The rigid lines of the mobster's fight finally soften. He pours 2 glasses of burning scotch, handing her one while murmuring it was not bravery, but a calculated survival tactic. Arya gently clinks her glass against his. To calculated risks, she replies, and to the sheer will of surviving them. They drink in unison. It leaves you wondering, how often do we mistakenly label pure desperation as courage when our backs are simply pressed against the wall? You and I know the classic trope, a mob boss offering the girl a safe gilded cage. But Leon shatters that mold. Swirling his drink, he predicts the authorities will seize Volkov by dawn. Then, he offers Arya something far deadlier than a cash payout. He wants an equal. He needs a sharp mind to help manage his vast syndicate, laying all his cards entirely on the table. Arya studies his features, searching for hidden traps, but finds only raw honesty. She quietly says she will think about it. They stand shoulder to shoulder, watching the restless metropolis below. In that rare, heavy silence, we find a profound realization. The deepest, most enduring peace in this life rarely comes from avoiding the storm. It usually finds us right after our most brutal personal wars are finally finished. Barely standing from exhaustion, Arya murmurs she must check on her brother. Leon steps close, quietly noting Ethan is already resting. The invincible boss lets his armor fracture. His voice drops, admitting how deeply she terrified him tonight. Tracing her cheek with gentle hesitation, he confesses that seeing her in the crosshairs is his breaking point. Arya offers a bittersweet smile, warning him. Her presence will complicate his survival. He tells her to stay regardless. When she pulls him into a kiss, the frantic desperation of their past is gone. It is a slow, deliberate anchor into their shared future. She leans against his chest, grounded by the steady rhythm of his heart. It is a vital reminder. Even in our absolute darkest nights, we can always discover a real reason to keep holding on. Exhausted, she admits her anger remains. The resentment of being manipulated on his violent chessboard still burns. Leon accepts this, agreeing to suspend their war until Volkov is ruined. The strike happens at dawn. Federal agents completely shatter Volkov's fortress. By the penthouse glass, Arya watches the news capture, the untouchable kingpin paraded in orange, stripped of his terrifying power. She whispers that the sacrifice was worth it. Leon stands nearby, silently nursing a broken arm he refuses to explain. For 3 months, she sits in a cold courtroom, tearing open her darkest traumas for a jury. It is an excruciating ordeal, yet it reveals a harsh reality we all face. Sometimes the only way to properly bury your worst demons is to drag them kicking and screaming right into the blinding daylight. Here is where you and I separate cinema from reality. The jury takes 4 hours to hand Volkov a life sentence, but there is no triumphant music. When the gavel strikes, Arya feels only a chilling absence of emotion. No sweet closure, just a deafening silence. Marcus calls once with a fractured apology before vanishing entirely. Then comes Ethan. He spends 8 grueling weeks in a rehab center, Leon quietly bankrolled. The boy who walks out is forever altered. A tired, sober man meets her gaze, heavy with the shame of failing her when the crossfire started. Arya looks back at her brother, offering no easy absolution, only the silent understanding of a difficult, shared lesson. True survival is never a clean victory. Most of the time, it is an agonizing, messy toll extracted from the deepest parts of your soul. She tells her brother, stripping all judgment from her voice, that they were both drowning. The difference is, they finally crawled onto the shore. Ethan retreats to a quiet existence, teaching at a local center, while their Sunday calls become a slower ritual of rebuilding their family. Arya takes a different path. She steps into the power vacuum, seizing control of Leon's shipping routes. Her instinct for reading hostile rooms makes her an incredible executive. Leon hands over the wheel. They clash constantly, arguing fiercely over the blurred line between protection and control. Yet, she is finally free to make her own strategic mistakes. It reveals a rule of human nature we all must learn. Authentic trust is never manufactured in moments of safety. It is only ever forged in the absolute center of the fire. 6 months pass. In the quiet midnight hours, a single lamp lights Leon's desk. Arya pores over syndicate contracts, hunting a loophole meant to bleed them of millions. From the shadows, Leon watches her mind work. He murmurs that she actually enjoys the ruthless mechanics of the game. Arya does not apologize. She simply asks if embracing power is a bad thing. He steps forward, fully aware of the metamorphosis before him. The terrified target from the diner is gone, replaced by a brilliant strategist. He speaks softly, reminding her that he merely unlatched a door. She is the one who kicked it open. As his hand rests against her jaw, his quiet pride anchors her spirit. Keep this lesson close in your own life. Genuine authority is never simply handed over. It must be unapologetically claimed. She leans into his palm, letting the heavy weight of her armor crash to the floor. The old dynamic of savior and victim is entirely obliterated. When she asks what comes next, Leon offers a vision of true partnership. They will build this empire side by side. Her kiss seals the pact. The frantic collision of their early days is replaced by the profound gravity of a deliberate choice. Resting his forehead against hers, he strips away his syndicate defenses. The untouchable boss confesses his love, asking her to turn his cold fortress into a real home. He is a man made of violence, but that darkness is exactly what she understands. We often wait around for pristine fairy tales. The reality is much sharper. True love is usually just two heavily scarred people looking at each other and finally deciding to stop running. Let's look at this piece by piece. This narrative completely rejects the tired trope of the knight rescuing the maiden. This bond was forged in paranoia. It possessed razor-sharp edges and required immense psychological grit to survive. When Arya looks Leon in the eye and commits to staying, the ruthless kingpin finally exhales, dropping his lethal guard. 2 years pass, and the landscape has shifted. The trembling victim, weeping on the bathroom tiles, has been erased. Now we see Arya standing before a towering mirror, adjusting the lapels of a tailored dark suit. She embodies a crucial philosophy we should all remember. True courage is never the total absence of fear. It is feeling the panic in your chest, watching your hands shake, and taking the shot anyway. She didn't need rescuing. She simply became her own savior. The cold architecture of the penthouse has undergone a radical evolution. It breathes now, transformed into a sanctuary scattered with framed photographs, tangible proof that two violent trajectories successfully aligned. Elena, the housekeeper, interrupts the silence with a warm smile, advising Arya to stop adjusting her collar because Mr. Varley is waiting. Arya laughs, amused that the syndicate boss can anticipate her anxiety from a floor away. Studying her reflection, we see a formidable executive commanding 40 enforcers across 3 major operations. It reinforces an essential truth. The validation of others is fleeting, but earning your own profound respect is the ultimate triumph. Down in the marble foyer, Leon waits in his dark suit, his dangerous aura intact, looking up at his equal with unshakable pride. Stepping into the rhythm of the underworld, a memory catches her off guard. Arya flashes back to the freezing rain and the desperation of calling Leon when she had 0 options left. Retracing the architecture of her trauma, she realizes she would not erase a single scar. We are conditioned to hide our failures. But hitting rock bottom is not an indicator of weakness, and reaching for a lifeline does not make you weak. Ironically, the people who witness our total destruction are often the only ones equipped to help us rebuild. Leon laces his fingers through hers, the steady grip of an anchor. When he asks where her thoughts are drifting, she murmurs about the miles behind them. He smirks, warning of the brutal climb still ahead. She simply smiles. The paralyzing fear is completely gone. Now she actively craves the fight. The steel doors of the elevator slide shut, sealing the kingpin and his equal inside a quiet vacuum. As the car descends toward the glittering chaos of the city, a profound clarity washes over Arya. She studies the reflection of their intertwined hands in the polished metal. knowing this empire belongs to her just as much as it does to him. She did not ascend to this throne by playing the passive victim while a savior cleared the path. When the inferno peaked, she walked directly into the flames and forged her own escape. Let's finish our journey on this thought. You cannot spend your life waiting for a last-minute hero to intervene. You must pick up the sword and learn to save yourself. Once you conquer your own survival, you become the undisputed architect of your fate, and no one can ever take that crown away.